Once again, the MCU has immense potential to create a fantastic villain, but instead we get mediocrity. And what's really frustrating about the character Mysterio is that they were so close. Halfway through Far From Home, Mysterio is arguably the best character in the movie. In the first half of Far From Home, Mysterio was charming, badass, and he was played by Jake Gyllenhaal, so he pretty much had everything going for him. But sadly, this character was halted in his own tracks, because Far From Home needed a big bad guy. And this leads me to my first point in the video. You know what, just once, I would like one of these superhero movies to not have some big major villain and instead just focus on the protagonist. You can have some minor bad guys in there to kind of show action and the superhero life of Spider-Man, but this movie was also about Peter's personal life. Far From Home could have been a movie showing the struggles of Peter's social life. This could have been an improvement upon Spider-Man 2. I didn't think Spider-Man 2 needed Dr. Octopus as the big bad villain, and I personally thought he was the weakest part of the movie. And in the second half of Far From Home, that's exactly what Mysterio becomes. Now, in Far From Home, Peter's social life isn't that interesting. I mean, the only thing he wants to do is get with his girl, so the stakes are pretty low. But let's just pretend that the movie had high stakes for his social life. We can keep the same premise of Peter being conflicted between becoming the next Iron Man and his social life. Peter wants to do everything a normal teenager does, but because of people like Tony Stark, he feels like he has a responsibility to carry on Iron Man's legacy. Now, pretty much all of what I said so far sounds like the premise of Far From Home, but this is where the change comes in. Peter doesn't use Mysterio as an out for his responsibilities, but instead challenges him. Mysterio and Peter start off as good friends in the first half of the movie, but bicker at each other in the second half. Mysterio believes he's a better candidate for the Iron Man legacy because he'd be even better than Iron Man, as opposed to just filling his shoes. The reason being, Mysterio puts 100% into his superhero life, unlike Peter and Tony, who have to balance out their social lives and their hero lives. And Peter's argument would just simply be, Iron Man chose me for the job. There's no stupid drone army for Peter, it's all about the title. It's about whether or not Peter can balance out between being a hero and a normal teenager. There's also no stupid, big explosive battle at the end of the movie, just Peter struggling between the balance of two lives. And again, Mysterio shouldn't be a villain in this movie, but more of an obstacle. You want Peter to succeed because he's a likable character and the main protagonist, but Mysterio's arguments are more logical. Peter starts to realize that Mysterio would make a better hero and then becomes even more conflicted. The tipping point of Peter's decision should come from his own conflicting motives, not because he was simply tricked by Mysterio. You got Tony Stark, Happy, Aunt May, the people, Peter's friends, and Nick Fury believing in Peter, while throwing in an Uncle Ben flashback, and you have the reasoning behind Peter's motivational tipping point. And because of the massive support, Peter builds up more confidence in himself and becomes fully committed with his hero life. And also realizing that because he has this power, he also has a responsibility. This would cause Mysterio to be greatly upset and jealous because despite his logical arguments, Peter isn't listening to him. He'll also be upset that a teenager upstages him and takes everything he worked so hard for. Out of purely revenge, a disgruntled Mysterio reveals Spider-Man's identity to the public, and then Mysterio becomes a villain. Mysterio is one of the most poorly developed characters in the MCU. Now, obviously, characters like Malekath and Ronan are much more bland, but these characters weren't supposed to have development in the first place. There should have been way more build-up for Mysterio. Not a 15-second flashback of him bitching and moaning about, oh, Iron Man took my plans and used it for something else. I'm serious, as soon as he stepped on that bar table, he became a whiny bitch. Kinda like me. Why does he want to be in the spotlight? Why does he want to be a hero? I don't know. He just does. At least for Killmonger, we saw why he wanted to do the things he did. It didn't really make any sense, but at least we saw reasoning behind why he did the things he did. But getting back to the villain plot twist scene, this is the worst scene in the movie, hands down. It is so cringeworthy how much exposition is thrown at your face. It literally comes out of nowhere. Jumps on the bar table and just starts naming off people and saying their accomplishments and then talking about why he's doing the things he's doing. And this terrible scene also shows why this guy should have been an Iron Man villain and not a Spider-Man villain. This guy had a grudge against Tony Stark, and he's dead. Why give him that character trait? How about give him something that Peter did that negatively affected him? The chemistry between Spider-Man and the villainous Mysterio sucks. I feel nothing when these two fight each other. And while that illusion scene in Far From Home was probably the coolest part of the movie, it still felt out of place. Why is Mysterio tormenting Peter? We were never given the impression that Mysterio is the torturing type. Now, I could see him doing that to someone like Tony Stark, but Peter really did nothing to warrant that. It just made the character less likable because you would think that he would have a soft spot for Peter because he was able to bond with him. And that's probably the main reason why the chemistry between the two characters suck. All those interactions before Mysterio became a villain are just thrown out of the movie. It's like Far From Home forgot that these two characters bonded before Mysterio became a villain. There's no interactions between the characters that show Peter's disappointment in Beck. I feel like that would have added more interesting chemistry and dialogue between the characters. It's kind of like when Obi-Wan found out that Anakin is the villain. His disappointment and anger shows that these two characters have a strong connection. And sure, there's a difference between two characters who have known each other for years and two characters who have known each other for a couple of days. But there were little subtle moments of Peter realizing that Beck is a lot like Tony Stark, and that never comes into play at the end. It's pretty much forgotten about. Just like Beck and Peter's relationship before Mysterio became a villain. There were so many good setups for Mysterio, but the movie never takes advantage of it. Once again, the MCU doesn't know what to do with this villain, so they just kill him off for no reason. The one thing the DCEU is doing right is that now they're keeping their villains alive, because they have this good idea about having an Injustice League. This is something characters like Ultron and Killmonger should be a part of, and that includes Mysterio. Because unlike most MCU villains, Mysterio has a personality, and they completely wasted this character. Even Mysterio's death is stupid. I mean, he basically shoots himself on accident. I was pretty pissed off Killmonger got killed off, but at least he died in a badass way. Mysterio went out like a bitch.